Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not. I'm sure you know that as well. And we're live on Facebook. Wonderful. Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Authors Love Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. My name is Kimberly Hensel-Lorance, and I'm your host today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is actually, I should say, this is our 43rd episode. And so we're very excited for those of you who tune in every week. And if you're with us for the first time, a little bit about A Mighty Blaze. We are a volunteer effort of writers and creatives who love books and storytelling and authors and bookstores. We work to bring attention to these essential parts of our culture during COVID-19 and beyond. Authors Love Bookstores is an online program that I put together in conjunction with fellow writer Joe Moldover. Our goal is to highlight authors and the books that we love that they've written. And we also talk with independent bookstores that they love all across the US and Canada to tell you what makes these stores so special and what you can do to support their continued survival. So today and every day we meet, we have an independent bookseller and we also have an author. And so we're so excited for today's broadcast. I'm so thrilled to welcome best-selling and award-winning author Danielle Trussoni to Authors Love Bookstores. Welcome, Danielle. I am a big fan of Danielle's books. I have actually spent a lot of time reading Danielle's books, and so I feel like I have so many questions for today's show. Danielle is the New York Times and USA Today and Sunday Times best-selling author of 3 novels and 2 memoirs, including The Ancestor, The Fortress, and Falling Through the Earth, as well as Angelology. I'm going to say this wrong. How do you say it, Danielle?
I say Angelology.
Angelology.
Yeah, I put the emphasis on angel.
Angel. I feel like every time I say the titles of these books, I add like an extra syllable.
You know, everybody does, and that's a good argument for having not used that title. But I really love the title anyway, even though it's difficult. It's sort of like one of these things, like the harder it is, like the more special.
Oh, I think it's a great title. And then the sequel to that book is called Angelopoulos.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about those because I just read them and I have many questions. Danielle's books have been translated into 33 languages. She's the creator of the Crypto Z podcast, which is a cinematic sci-fi audio drama and a great companion to listen to after you read The Ancestor. She also created the Writerly podcast, which goes into the art and business of writing. In addition to being published in the New York Times Book Review, where she is a horror columnist, she has also been in The Guardian, the New York Times Magazine, and Tin House, and her writings have been widely anthologized. She has an MFA in fiction from the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she won the Michener Copernicus Society of America Award, and she's a member of the Authors Guild Council and has been a Pulitzer Prize in fiction jurist. Now we take a breath. That's a wonderful bio. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you so much for being here, Danielle. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I have to say before we start, thank you for putting this together and for all of the organization you've done and all the reading and reaching out. Right now, as I'm sure you know more than anyone, independent booksellers need us. And I'm so thrilled to be here to support Boswell Books, which is one of my favorite places.
Wonderful. Perfect segue into introducing our other guest. Chris Lee is here with us today. Chris is a bookseller at Boswell Book Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Boswell, which is named after the 18th century British biographer James Boswell, opened in 2009. And we are so excited that Chris is here. Thank you, Chris. This bookstore, when I was doing research, is on like all of these lists of bookstores in America that you absolutely must visit.
Yeah, the listers have been very, very kind to us. But yeah, thank you so much again, Kimberly, setting this up. I'll double down on that. The work you're doing, it's wonderful. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Selfishly, this is a joy for me. I love how last year I sat down and read The Ancestor and said, oh my gosh, I have to talk to Danielle Trussoni. And so, and now here you are. And then when we were putting together a list of bookstores we wanted to talk to, Boswell was on the list. So I'm so happy it's worked out. And it's also fortuitous because, as I understand it, Danielle, you had an event planned with Boswell beginning of last year that had to be canceled because of the pandemic. And so this is a little way of bringing you all together. Tell us, what is it about this bookstore that makes you love it so much and that you wanted to talk to it today? talk to
Well,
Chris today?
well, part of it was because of that event being canceled that I wanted to come back and be able to connect with Chris. But my relationship with Boswell Book Company, and actually Danielle Golden, who is the owner of this store, goes back to the beginning of my career, actually. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm not from Milwaukee, but I'm from La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is on the other side of the state. When I was in college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I was a bookseller at Canterbury Booksellers. That's how I, earned my rent money while I was going to college. And I used to go to, before Danielle opened Boswell, there was a bookstore in Milwaukee called, I believe it was Schwartz. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, Schwartz Booksellers.
Yes. And I used to go there and just like, I just loved it. There was so many books, and, I don't, for an aspiring writer to be surrounded by people who know so much about books and love books as much as you do, it meant a lot to me then. And then when my first book came out, I was invited to do a reading at Schwartz. That was 2006, I believe. And I met Daniel in person, and then our relationships just sort of continued. As my books came out, he was always very supportive, and I always tried to come back. And then this year, in April, my book came out the first week of April, which maybe was the worst week because people were still like, what the hell is happening here? Is this going to just pass by, or is this are we really going to be stuck without being able to travel? Like, nobody really knew. So there wasn't a backup plan for my book publication, and everything literally just fell apart. And one of my most anticipated events was at Boswell, where we were going to launch their horror section.
Yes.
Yeah, which was, I really like, that was going to be it for me. And we had the horror, members from the Horror Writers Association coming, and we had this whole thing planned. And so the fact that that didn't happen is, really too bad. I would like for that to happen when the world goes back to normal, and have, especially I like the idea of bringing in the Horror Writers Association, which is a great collective of people who just support the whole spectrum of horror. If you like, very sort of classic horror like Clive Barker or Stephen King, or if you like Gothic fiction or anything on that spectrum, the Horror Writers Association really supports it. So hopefully we can, make that happen again.
I'm sure that would be something that the store would love very much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yes. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, no. Yeah, Danielle, no, we so wanted to do something, and this was one of the huge events. I was particularly excited about it because I'm a big horror reader, and so like launching the horror section, all this fun stuff we wanted to do in the store, we were super excited about. It has been a disappointment, so it's great to be able to sit down with you. We have been selling the Ancestor out of the horror section. Kimberly and I were chatting earlier about it. Is it horror? What is it? And I call it totally awesome gothic horror. But yeah. Our horror section launch was a lot quieter without you, it was kind of just we have a shelf of horror books now, and we put a picture on Instagram. So not the same.
Not the same. I'm sad, but we're going to christen it at some point for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So one of the things that fascinated me about reading The Ancestor, and I mentioned this to Chris before we came on, was that I didn't know what kind of genre this book was. And then afterward, I read a story about your book, Danielle, and it described it that it might be in the horror genre. And I found that to be fascinating because I think of horror, I think in my mind exclusively Stephen King.
Yeah.
Right? Like super scary, nightmare inducing. But your book is so much different than that. It's much more suspenseful, twists and turns, mysterious. I really enjoyed it so much. Can you describe The Ancestors for our readers, the ones who haven't yet read it yet, so they'll go and buy it?
Yes. So the premise of the book it's about a woman who's having some sort of troubles in her life. She learns that she has inherited an estate in Italy. She took a genetic test, a DNA test, and her information got published on the DNA sort of database. And this family who their last living, the last members had died out, the estate found her and basically informed her that she, was rich. So it's kind of this, it's this premise that seems like it's going to be one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like it's going to be this fairy tale story, but it ends up moving very slowly into Gothic horror as she realizes that this inheritance is really not what she thought it was. And in fact, she is not even what she thought she was. And that movement for me, between sort of this aspirational, like, oh, my life is going to change, and this new reality was really interesting. That's what I wanted to explore, is that character movement.
Okay. That was my question. I was so curious where the story started for you, the writing of it. Was it this idea of, because you just have so many entry points into the story, this idea of like taking a DNA test and then uncovering a secret, right? Because so many people, we all have stories. There's been the whole books about people who find new families. And so that's one point. But then also this idea of essentially like winning the lottery and someone knocking on your door saying, hi, there's a castle in Italy that's for you now. And then everything not quite being what it seems.
Right.
I was so, there, you could just see how there's so many ways you could start the story. And I love to hear that it's the character arc is where you.
Well, and also the concept, because all of my books, like I keep looking, you say that it's hard to classify the genre of my book, and other people, reviewers, have also had that trouble, because I tend to like to bring a whole mixture of genres together. I love my training, I guess if you call an MFA, like the kind of writing that I started with my memoir, is very literary, literary fiction. Yet I love some of my favorite authors are, Mary Shelley or the Brontes, like the sort of dark 19th century Gothic writing. And so, I wanted to combine all of those things. And I think that all of my books essentially do. But another thread between all of my books is there's sort of, I guess, a high concept behind them. Like there's sort of an idea lurking that I want to explore. And this one was basically, what does it mean to be part of the human race? What does it mean to be part of the human family? What does it mean if you take the long sort of deep view of history to be what we are now? I think that our world is so tribal. And we classify ourselves as Americans, and then as women, and then as descended from Italian American, and then white, like all of these little classifications. But if you take a few steps back, it's only 100,000 years that we've been, not even, actually it's more like 20,000 years that we've been the only kinds of humans on the planet. There was a point when there were 5 different kinds of humans living on the planet simultaneously. So anyway, I'm getting really into like the nitty gritty of why I was interested, but I am interested in looking at genetics, evolution, human history, and what that meant, and how that could play out in a very fast moving sort of suspenseful narrative.
And it is incredibly suspenseful, I have to say. And even I read it again last week, and even though I knew what was going to happen, I still was on the edge of my seat, like turning the pages too fast, having to go back, because it was just, I had to know what was happening. And I think that suspense part of it is, it's so good, Danielle. It's so like,
Thank you. So Chris, I love not being bored, right? Like I don't want to bore.
Yes. But I also think that, the other thing is when you read a book that you enjoy and you're caught up in the story, the worst thing is when you can predict where it's going to end.
Right.
It's true. It's sort of, you want the writer. I mean, maybe it's just me. I always want the writer to be way ahead of me. And I think with your books, I can say this now because I read 3 of your books, that I never knew what was going to happen next, which is like the best compliment, right? It means I'm so caught up in the story and it works so well. So
thank you.
Yeah. Chris, I'm fangirling a little bit, so let me fangirl about the store. So tell us a little bit about what this year has been like for Boswell. And we've heard so much about indie bookstores struggling during this time, so many stores that have closed. what has been the most surprising thing you've learned about book selling in 2020? How is the store doing?
The store's doing fairly well, to be honest with you. I can't complain too much. I don't think we're going to publicly complain or anything. Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting year, as everyone says, and as everyone's well aware. A couple of the big things I think we've kind of learned to adapt. Um, Obviously, our events, we're an event-driven store. We were started as an event-driven store, and I don't think we'll ever not be that. So going online and pivoting to that very quickly has been very interesting. Like everybody, we've gotten very good at using Zoom and other tools like that. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that's that big a deal for bookstores, because if you look at independent bookstores, we've spent the last 20, 25 years adapting and pivoting and learning how to change. I was thinking about this when we were talking about what we were going to talk about. And I mean, in the 90s, it was the chain bookstores. And then more recently, it's been the online giant who will remain unnamed, that we're trying to figure out how can we be something different? What can we do and what can we provide, and continue to pivot. And so I think a lot of our planning in general has been how can we be flexible? And so that really prepared us well for this year, always being prepared to be flexible. One of the really fun things we've done throughout the year is events with other stores, and to be able to connect with other stores in Wisconsin, like Inklink Books in East Troy, are wonderful. We're doing a series with them. Books and Company in Economawalk, another store we worked with in the past. We're doing a monthly series with them we love. And then also just being able to connect with authors who we normally wouldn't be able to. We've done several conversations with authors. I did one a couple of months ago with an author, and she was sitting in, I believe, Brighton, England. We've got one on Friday with someone in Ireland, and that's just been an absolute blast. So really finding new ways to do the things we've done before, and finding, the benefit, I guess, the upside of, hey, everyone's just doing it online now. That's been really interesting.
That is a common refrain that we have heard from booksellers during this series, is this idea of pivoting and this idea of just having to be flexible. That doesn't negate, though, the fact that it is incredibly laborious, and intensive for the stores to have to be that flexible and to change.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And I mean, it's not as if we're not going through the same challenges every retail business is right now, and everyone who has, we have limited browsing right now. I mean, one of the other biggest surprises to me this year has been how no one has a clue where their nose is on their face, apparently, when they're putting their mask on. But you could potty train someone in this amount of time. But no, I mean, it's been a challenge figuring out how to do things in store and everything. But what can you do? You either accept the challenge or
you have to survive. You have to change, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things that makes independent bookstores so special is the fact that you can walk in and you can say, I read this book and it has a purple cover. And it was about flowers. And the bookseller will say, oh, it was this book. And then recommend 3 other books that that person might like because they mentioned the purple flower book. So that art of the recommendation, that art of the book, of the hand selling books, how are you maintaining that very special part of Boswell store experience in this COVID environment?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love doing this. It's one of the reasons I love being here. Although, every once in a while you have to convince someone, I promise you the cover really wasn't purple. It's this book.
They remember it to be purple and it's really orange. Yeah.
It's happened before. But anyway.
I'm sure it has.
Yeah, we've done a lot of different things. Every year we do our big holiday gift guide, and we did that all online. We pivoted to keeping things online and trying to get our best of lists, our books that we have, our wall here of books that we're excited about, the Boswell best, and keeping that online, keeping those browsing pages up and everything like that has been, I think that's been a help and everything like that. But otherwise, just, continue. We do it over the phone. Call us up. We've been doing, recommendations over the phone. like I say, we have limited browsing hours. So we've been doing that for a couple months, and it's been really nice to feel like a bookstore again, to be able to talk to people about books again, you know. So yeah.
Danielle, since you worked at a bookstore when you were in college, what is it like for you to go into a bookstore now? Do you rearrange the shelves? Do you sort of have opinions about how books should be organized? And especially being an author, I wonder what that experience is like.
I don't actually rearrange the shelves, although I have been known occasionally to pull my book out and put it face forward.
Of course. Of course.
I have done that once in a while, but I know a lot about how the store works, right? Because I was in the back room, unloading the boxes and putting the stickers on, and then hand selling, going through the whole process. So actually, as an author, it helps, I think, to be informed about how it actually works. Not only from writing the book, getting the idea, actually writing the book, finding an agent, selling the book to a publisher, working with an editor, understanding what it means to publicize a book, and then it going to the store, and then you show up to do an event, and you know what those people working in the store are experiencing. So I find it, it's invaluable to have that experience. Also, you're just in your own community, right? I'm among book lovers, in a bookstore, and that's what drew me there to begin with, to be a bookseller. And it's what brings me back as an author. So the whole experience is part of writing too, I think.
What advice would you give to new authors, debut authors who are interacting with bookstores for the first time? What's like the most important thing they should know about when they start talking with booksellers?
Just never take them for granted, right? One of the, I'm sure that I'm guilty of this too, but when you have your first book published, it's so overwhelming that you often just go through it and you're not doing the things like following up with the booksellers saying thank you, or remembering their names, or I don't know, just all the little things that now, having published 5 books, feels natural to me. But I remember with my first book, it was just like, so, coming at me from every direction. But so someone who's publishing their first book, I would say, keep a file full of all the places that you visit on your book tour or virtual book tour or whatever, and make sure that you can stay in touch. Make sure that they know that you appreciate the fact that they're out there talking about your book to people. It makes a big difference.
And I'll just jump in and say, Dan, you're a champion at that.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't always. I think after my first book, I sort of was so in shock that I had a book published, and I was like, oh, whoa, what's going on? And I just sort of went away for a while. But yeah, now it feels natural to be interacting with booksellers. It makes me really happy, because you see, it's so lonely being a writer. I'm writing a book now, and I sit in my office every day alone for hours and hours at a time, and I have no idea what effect it will have. And so when I go into a bookstore physically in the space and I do a reading, or I talk to a bookseller, or I talk to readers, it's just wonderful. Like it's the first moment where you feel like maybe what I'm doing all day in that office that seems totally crazy, right? Like making up characters and they're talking to each other. It's like, okay, am I nuts? No, people are enjoying it. They're experiencing what I'm creating. And it becomes a real thing then.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the real joys of book selling, is to be able to get that to other people too. But the interaction with authors, it goes both ways. It's such a blast for us to bring in people who created the books we're passionate about. So, absolutely.
Chris, have you ever had a customer come in and ask for a recommendation and you are stumped? You cannot think of something to recommend to them?
Yeah, anytime someone asks me for a kid's book, mostly.
Oh, kids book. That's your weakness. Yeah. That's your kryptonite.
Yeah, it's totally my Achilles heel. I mean, I have my go-tos like anybody. We all have you work in the bookstore long enough, you get that like, okay, I better have something in this section. So I've got the Klassen books, the Hat trilogy, and my handful of like old middle grade books I remember from 25 years ago. But yeah, no, totally. Kids section. The great thing about this team here, though, is that, I know I can hand them off to Tim or Barb or Jenny or a handful of people and like trust that they're going to get them in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we want everyone to read The Ancestor. I read it twice in 1 year, so that's a big indication that you should go read it. And but Danielle, you have other books, 4 other books, 2 fiction, 2 memoir, and your other fiction books are a series about angels that live in the earth alongside humans, and these books that you write are so it's so mysterious to me how you take this idea, this sort of mythology, and make it so real.
That's part of my mission, I guess. I mean, and I've only realized that now after The Ancestor. But I love taking the mythological and the imaginary and the sort of what ifs
Mm-hmm.
in our culture and creating a narrative that feels so literal and so detailed that we're confused about whether it's real or not.
Mm-hmm.
After I wrote Angelology, so for those of you who haven't read it, the premise of it is that there are, so I'm just going to take a step back. In the Bible, there's a tiny little passage, Genesis 6, that mentions giants, and the word was translated from a number of sources, but the other translation of that is Nephilim, which were these creatures that were half angel, half human, and in many pseudo-epigraphical texts, they exist on the earth alongside humans, right? And so I read that and I was fascinated. Like, what if we're living in this world and there's actually an explanation for evil, right? Because the Nephilim are evil. So I took that premise and I created, a whole world around it with a young woman who discovers that she has a mission to uncover these creatures and actually to fight them. And then there's this other, guy, Verlaine, who is pulled into it, and they become sort of partners in crime. And anyway, so when I was writing that book, I had people emailing me and saying, I Googled this part of the book, and that happened, didn't it? Did it really happen? And that's such a thrilling experience for an author to have people say, is that real?
Mm-hmm.
Is she joking? Or is she making this up? Because partially it's so researched, right? And The Ancestor is very researched too. There's a lot of textual research and actually going to certain places. Like The Ancestor is partially set in the Aosta Valley in Italy, up in the Alps. And so I went to the Alps and I stayed in a castle, they're just an Airbnb sort of rental that they do these days. And I walked through the mountains and I ate in the restaurant, and I really just sort of felt it when I was writing the book. So that's sort of immersion. Some actors call it method, right? That they just drop into the characters in the world is something that I like to do for each of my books. And I think that that's a characteristic that connects them. I'm
so happy to hear that other people Googled parts of your book too, because I did the same thing when I read them. Like, is this really happening? What is this? So that's great. I feel like I've entered
and then they get freaked out when they see that actually there was this conference in 12 AD or whatever with these priests, and I like to keep things historically grounded, because as you mentioned, when you start to diverge, when reality starts to diverge, it feels scarier. It feels like you're on a precipice somehow. And I love the uncanny, and that's really what I want to create in the book.
And the uncanny probably is more effective when it's based in this element of reality as well. Because then I think people, at least my experience reading your books, is if you get to the last page and I kind of sat there and thought, oh, this could totally be really happening right now.
You're looking over your shoulder, like, hold on.
Who do I know who's an angel? Do you plot out your books? Are you a pants? There's this, pantser or plotter?
I'm somewhere in between. Because every time I do create a plot and an outline, I always deviate. So I attempt, right? I'm not someone who's just like, I'm just gonna go in and let's see where I go. No, I can't do that. I usually know the beginning, middle, and end. But all of the twists and turns and the complexities in some of the characters and some of the situations, they come to me as I'm writing, and I want to be fluid. I want those surprises to come in because they're surprising me at the same time. And if they're surprising me, they're going to surprise you. So I do like to mix it up, but somewhere in between.
I love that idea that you're surprised when you write. That's exciting. Chris, so we want everyone to read Danielle's books. But then there are also other books that are popular in the store right now. So what are people at Boswell Book Company reading?
For sure, for sure. So I brought a stack.
I know you brought a stack. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a big stack. So I'm gonna throw out just a couple of my like beloved go-to recommendations. First of all is Stuart Onan's Last Night at the Lobster, which is literally a book about a red lobster in New England on a snowy night that's closing. It's a one-night book. Manny, the manager, has got to figure out what he's going to get his girlfriend, how he's going to get the other girl involved in his life, less angry at him, lots of stuff going on. Just a wonderful, trim little novel, great winter book if you're enjoying the cold outside. If you're not, Enchanted Island's probably the book for you, which is Alison Amon's novel, set during World War II, but it's not your typical World War II book. It's essentially a woman who's living a very quiet life. She's just past middle age, working at a government office in San Francisco when a couple federal agents come to her and say, will you marry this man and go spy on a German couple in the Galapagos with him? Great novel. So those are just like a couple of my go-to staff recs. And then like stuff that we've had that's been really popular. I just grabbed, first of all, I got a handful of Wisconsin writers. Stephen writes, Danielle, right? We're all about the Wisconsin writers.
I don't know that novel, so I'm looking at it with, I'm very
Oh, it's great. So it's kind of, our Danielle has been calling it a political thriller. I think it's a very literary political satire, which probably means it lands like somewhere in the middle of that. But it's about Dre. He's essentially a bag man for a political company. He's the guy who comes in with $250,000 in dark money. He has to go to a small town in South Carolina to get them essentially to vote the way that a lot of moneyed interests want them to. He gets very involved in the local politics, and also as a young Black man from DC, he doesn't exactly fit in, so he's got to get a bunch of the locals on his side. Just really well written. Stephen Wright, the author, is a fascinating guy, teaches at University of Wisconsin in Madison, teaches both law and writing, and he's I'll think of it, head of the Wisconsin Innocence Project too. So just really fascinating.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really cool guy. And then
time to write a book.
I write. He's writing another one now. Like we were amazed, but we were talking to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on the second." The other one, of course, everyone's into Homeland Elegies. Everyone loves this book, and a lot of it's set right outside Milwaukee because Ada grew up outside of Milwaukee. And so the book, just for anyone who doesn't know, it's a big question book. I think it falls into my favorite genre, the great American novel, right? Which is, what is it to be an American, especially for the son? He's a first generation American, the son of Pakistani immigrants. And it also deals with his father's a heart doctor who was Donald Trump's doctor in the 80s. But the book goes everywhere. It really goes everywhere. Non-Wisconsin author, but probably my favorite book of last year is The Knockout Queen by Ruthie Thorpe. Absolutely amazing novel, set in Southern California. We did an event with her. She's wonderful, super smart. It's about a gay teenage boy and his next door neighbor, who's a 6'3" young woman who is a volleyball hopeful. There's a violent act, and they're just characters who are too unbelievably alive to be real. A couple more?
Sure. I'm always fascinated. Again, we've talked to so many booksellers and there's never repeat recommendations.
Well, that's awesome. That's
Never.
awesome.
Like the books they're so eclectic and so different. I think it speaks to sort of what makes indie bookstores so special. You know, that you're going to get an array of books. I love that you brought a Wisconsin author as
Yeah,
well. So we can
absolutely.
count Danielle as a Wisconsin author.
Oh, totally, totally. We're not kicking you out. No way. Yeah, no. I mean, I've got a couple of people in here like post ex Wisconsinites too, but someone who lives just north of the city in one of the burbs is Nick Petrie, great thriller writer. The Breakers #6 in the Peter Ash series. The series is based around Peter Ash. He's a war veteran. He suffers from PTSD. He has a hard time being inside. At the same time, he keeps getting involved in kind of adventures. One of the great things about Nick is he does a lot of, like you, Daniel, does so much research for his books. And each one is placed in a different city. This is the one, it's 6 in the series, but it's the first one to bring his hero back to Milwaukee. There's kind of some techno thriller stuff going on, some disturbing technology that's all too real. It's a lot of fun. You want a good like action movie of a book, that's your book. And another former Wisconsinite, I absolutely love this book. I think it's the only political book that came out last year that was worth reading in the cottage industry that has been political books the last few years. But nothing is wrong, and here is why. She's a satire columnist, Alexandra Petri, I don't know how to say it, but I'm rolling with it. Satire columnist for the Washington Post. Absolutely wonderful essays that are like, if you take people in government who happen to be kind of evil at face value, it's also a little hilarious.
Those are great. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
We have an
absolutely.
audience comment from someone who said they want to recommend another Wisconsin author, Nicholas Butler,
Oh yeah,
Shotgun
Nicholas is
Lessons.
great. Yes, wonderful book.
That's
Wonderful
another, so
book.
that's a whole section you need in the bookstore. It's just Wisconsin authors.
Totally, totally. We have our look. We are so blessed with authors in this area that our local section, we won't even let you be outside of the Milwaukee metro. Like
Oh, wow.
that's how blessed we are. But yeah, Butler's awesome, and he's got a new book, the title of which is escaping me right now. But I know Nicholas has got one coming out this spring as well, spring or summer. So
Great.
keep an eye out for that.
Danielle, I know that you're working on a new project. I follow you on Instagram, so I see lots of pictures of Victorian houses.
Yeah.
Is that a new project? Can you?
Yes, I have. So I've finished a draft of a new novel, and it is largely set upstate New York in a old mid 19th century Gilded Age mansion, Victorian house. And I don't know how much more I'm going to say about it, other than it's a little bit like all of my books in that we start in this very realistic place and we end up someplace else. I will say that it involves to some degree porcelain dolls.
Oh, I wasn't going to bring up the dolls. I saw those on your feed too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of my big crazy stories that begins in one place and you don't know how the hell you got all the way over here, but by the end you're there.
So that must mean that you wrote a lot during this past year, this past pandemic year. How did you do that? Because we've heard from a lot of writers that it has been an incredibly difficult year.
It's been an incredibly difficult year for me too. I have a 3-year-old who wasn't in school for part of the year. And she's just high energy and needs a lot of attention. And so things haven't been very quiet or my writing life hasn't been very stable. But that said, having the goal of producing maybe a couple of pages a day or a certain amount of words a day has given me focus to get through this year. And that, as opposed to sort of having a panic attack or eating too much and going to sleep or whatever, or drinking too much, any of the things that I felt like doing over this year, going into my office in my free time when my daughter was taking a nap or when someone else had her was just a respite. It was like this moment of clarity and sanity. And for me, writing is a little bit like a meditation, right? Because everything's quiet, I'm in my space, no one's coming in, and I know I have those hours to work. And so for me, it was really the thing that got me through this year. Actually, the last 4 years, let's just,
Yes.
totally honest. Like it's been a continuum, but this year was really like grinding, as we all know.
We just got another audience question that I was going to ask. Will we see a sequel to Angelopoulos at some point?
So
Because
I,
it's the best. You ended it on this great cliffhanger.
I know, and I get emails about that all the time, and I'm just going to explain to the audience and to you what happened. So I wrote that series, and my editor left my publishing house.
Oh.
The second one, and the new team there didn't buy the third one. So it's really, I didn't stop writing that series because I wanted to. I stopped because I didn't have a publisher for it. And it's really quite difficult to have a different publishing house take up a series in the middle because they're not benefiting from having the other two. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm going to write, and then I'm just either going to find a publisher who will do that, who will publish in the middle of a series, or I'm going to self-publish, because that's, it's possible to do that now. I love the series, and I've had interest in the series for a television show, and I just, I really want it to continue. So yes, that's the long answer to say yes.
Well, I appreciate that you went into the detailed explanation, because I think a lot of people who watch, who are readers and not necessarily writers, don't understand how publishing works.
Right.
And so they just think, I think they think books are just written like that, and they don't understand that there's a whole process of selling the book and finding an editor and getting it out there, and it can be very challenging.
Yeah, and also like when your favorite television show is canceled, for example, people don't get, they don't really say, they don't really call up the actors and say, why aren't you back on? It is really, a novelist needs the support of an editor to be able to publish a book usually. So anyway, I'm very stubborn. And even though it's been quite a few years since that series I stopped writing, I'm going to continue. And when it starts again, it probably will just continue for a long time.
Excellent. Chris, answer this question for me. Running a successful independent bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
Good books.
Good books.
Good books.
Ooh, that's a great answer.
I mean, like, I couldn't be doing this. None of us could be doing this if there wasn't something out there people wanted to read. And, all the stuff we show, we're blessed that around here we have a bunch of people locally and all over the place. But yeah. I think it's been, for all of the things that 2020 was, I think it was actually a really, really good year for fiction. I think we were blessed. Danielle, your book and a whole lot of other really good books came out in 2020. I thought it was a really strong year for fiction in different genres. And I really think that helped carry a lot of stuff. I really do, because if, I myself was cooped up a lot of the time reading. I know we had so many other people saying, you guys are keeping us going, which we appreciate hearing, believe me. But yeah, if there weren't good new books that people were excited about, I don't know what we'd have to sell.
Excellent answer. So we've come to the end of our time, which I'm so disappointed about because I could talk to the two of you forever. Any last words about Boswell books that you want to share, Danielle?
Just that I'm so excited to come in person as soon as I can. So we're all going to have to plan a major event when we all are vaccinated, which hopefully will be soon, right?
Hopefully. I think there'll be lots of parties. Lots of parties, lots of unrestrained hugging.
I was just thinking how grateful we're all going to be to have normal life. It's amazing. Where every little thing that we haven't been able to do this year is going to feel special.
That's true. So readers, we've come to the end of our time. All you book lovers out there, again, big recommendation to go read Danielle's books, especially The Ancestor, which was described, I should have said this earlier, as chilling and inventive by the New York Times. We'll put the link below where you can buy it directly from Boswell Book Company. Also, feel free to go to Boswell Book Company's website, which is boswellbooks.com, get on their newsletter, follow them online for more of their upcoming events. Chris, I know you wanted to mention a couple other events that are happening at the
Oh yeah,
the
that'd
store.
be cool. First of all, I know Nancy's been doing stuff for Mighty Blaze.
Yeah, Nancy Johnson's part of a Mighty Blaze.
Awesome. So yeah, we're doing an event with Nancy coming up. That's, again, check it out on the website. She's going to be chatting with one of our local television anchors. And then Danielle said if I was going to do anything online, I had to tell people to come to the Leonard and Hungry Paul event. Speaking of authors from other countries, Ronan's joining us on Friday, all the way from Ireland, to chat about this novel. It's a novel about two 30-something-year-old guys who live with their parents and are nice, which is it's a wonderful. I know, right? It's an awesome friendship novel. Well, we have like 5 people in the store who love it. They're making me read it next. They've convinced me to read Backlist, which booksellers don't do. And we're just really, really excited about it. And everyone who reads it keeps saying, "This is the book I needed. This is the book I just needed to read right now." So that's on Friday. We've got a whole bunch more stuff. Join our website. If you drop in the store, we even do the print. The events are virtual, but we still have a print calendar. And yeah, we're open for limited browsing. Wear your mask, find your nose, cover it, and come on in.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
And then, of course, to hear more about what Danielle is up to, you can follow her on all the social media. You can see all the porcelain dolls and Victorian houses that fill your heart's desire. Also, her website's danielletrussoni.com, and you can check that out to find out more about what she has planned. And you have a newsletter as well, Danielle.
I do. You can subscribe to that on my website.
You can subscribe there as well. So thank you both, Chris and Danielle, for joining us today. Real pleasure to have you. Book lovers, be sure to join us back here next week for another episode of Authors Love Bookstores. Until then, be well and keep reading. Thank you.